Welcome to a thrilling NFL News Roundup. We've got a jam-packed update for you from today, and it's going to keep you at the edge of your seat. 1. Arizona Cardinals. In the land of the rising sun, the Cardinals are making some key moves. Budda Baker is back from his hamstring injury, ready to bring some fire against the Seahawks. Joining him is CB Garrett Williams, back in action. It's a pivotal moment for the Cardinals as they gear up for a showdown with Seattle. Now, let's move on to our next update. 2. Atlanta Falcons. Rising from the ashes, the Falcons have a pair of elevations on game day. T. Tucker Fisk and DL LaCal London. It's time for these soaring birds to show their mettle on the field. Now, let's move on to our next update. 3. Baltimore Ravens. Things are heating up in Baltimore. CB Marlon Humphrey is in question for the next game against the Lions due to illness. The Ravens are taking no chances. And don't forget, DB DeAndre Houston Carson is on the rise for game day, ready to defend the turf. Now, let's move on to our next update. 4. Buffalo Bills. The Bills are charging forward with confidence. DT Kendall Vickers is the name to remember as he joins the game day lineup. But not all's calm in Buffalo. Dion Dawkins felt the heat, being fined for some roughness last week. Now, let's move on to our next update. 5. Chicago Bears. The Bears are shaking up their roster. OL Doug Kramer makes a return from the injured reserve, providing some fresh strength to the squad. DB Jawan Williams is elevated for the next game day. Plus, there's a roster cut in the mix. Now, let's move on to our next update. 6. Cleveland Browns. The Browns are calling in reinforcements with RB Deion Jackson being signed to the active roster. On game day, QB PJ Walker and LB Charlie Thomas are poised to make their mark. Now, let's move on to our next update. 7. Denver Broncos. The Broncos have faced their share of bumps on the field. T. Greg Dulcich is sidelined on the injured reserve, and the fines are piling up, with S. Kareem Jackson receiving yet another. It's a tough road ahead in Denver. Now, let's move on to our next update. 8. Detroit Lions. The Lions are dealing with some obstacles as WR Marvin Jones won't be joining them on the field for personal reasons. However, Josh Paschal is back, and RB Mohamed Ibrahim and Devine Ozigbo are rising for game day. Now, let's move on to our next update. 9. Green Bay Packers. The Packers have some key players to watch. Aaron Jones is gearing up to play against the Broncos, but Jaire Alexander's participation remains uncertain. CB Eric Stokes is back from the physically unable to perform list. Now, let's move on to our next update. 10. Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars have trimmed their roster, saying goodbye to QB Nathan Rourke. Now, let's move on to our next update. 11. Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are elevating CB Cornell Armstrong for game day, bringing in extra defensive firepower. Now, let's move on to our next update. 12. Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are boosting their game day lineup with WR Keelan Doss and DB Mark Webb Jr., ready to electrify the field. Now, let's move on to our next update. 13. Los Angeles Rams. Unfortunately, the Rams are down a man with RB Kyron Williams landing on the injured reserve. However, they've signed RB Darrell Henderson to the active roster. Now, let's move on to our next update. 14. Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have welcomed back RB Jeff Wilson Jr. from injured reserve. However, CB Nick Needham won't be able to take on the Eagles. Now, let's move on to our next update. 15. Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are sweating over WR Jalen Nailor's hamstring injury. Og Ezra Cleveland and CB Akileb Evans are also nursing injuries. That's a wrap for the latest NFL updates. The league is alive with action, and we'll be here to keep you updated on all the twists and turns as the season unfolds. Stay tuned for more thrilling football action.